those of you, if this is your first time, I'm Chris Bogus, the Bariatric Coordinator, and our camera person is Laura Hernandez, the dietitian. And tonight I'm really, really excited to introduce our speaker, whom I have worked with for many, many years. She is a diabetic educator. She used to work at Shawnee Mission Medical Center and now works with Dr. Hayes, Dr. Lisa Hayes, and Dr. Gomes. And she is going to talk to us about diabetes after surgery and the changes and ways to continue to take care of yourself after that. And then afterwards, we will be getting into our small groups, and I'm going to come around and talk to you about what we're looking at for next year. So, Sandie, did I even say your name? Sandie Anderson. I'm not sure I did. This is Sandie Anderson, and she's going to talk to you tonight about diabetes. So.
And how long do I have before the groups?
30 minutes.
Okay. It's good.
35,
I can talk about this subject forever because it's one of my favorite subjects. So you might have to just like do this, Chris, when I'm done.
Okay.
Or take a shepherd so it can just pull me off the stage. Well, hey, this is a big group. I'm so excited to see you tonight. And first I want to say congratulations to you on starting off a new path in your life. How awesome and how exciting. And I just know you guys are doing wonderful, and I know you're really pumped up about it. And I'm very thrilled for you. I want to know how many are from out of town. I hear some of you might be from out of town. Yeah, where are you from? Wichita. You drove all the way here for this tonight? Oh my goodness. Where are you from? Oh, great. Who else is here? Yes. Where are you from?
Lawrence.
Lawrence, fantastic. Oh my goodness, I'm so impressed. You guys are coming from all over. Anybody from any other towns nearby? Where are you from?
KCK.
KCK? Where are you guys from? Paola. Excellent. Wonderful. Well, welcome to Kansas City and to Shawnee Mission Hospital's Prairie Star campus. We just love this campus. Isn't it awesome? Ooh, yes. I work at the big house, but this is actually closer to my home. So my favorite emergency room is right down here because you always get in. If any of you ever need one, that's where you're going to go. And you know, our very same doctors from the big hospital work down here. So you get excellent, excellent doctors, and it's fabulous. So you found a good spot. Well, Chris asked me tonight to talk about diabetes. And first of all, how many of you have heard that diabetes disappears after surgery? Okay. And that is spoken of many, many places on the internet, on TV. A lot of doctors will talk about that issue. But the truth is, and you know, bariatric surgery isn't a very old, we haven't been doing it too many awful years, so we don't have a lot of research to tell us what happens to diabetes after. Quite honestly, there is not a lot of research on this. But the studies that have been done are showing that it probably isn't 100% of folks who have it disappear. See, some of you are nodding, so you might have already discovered that. What do you think the number is of people who manage to not have diabetes after the surgery?
50?
A little bit more than that, it sounds like. Their studies are ranging from about 73% to 90%, depending on what studies you look at. So somewhere in that range. So if you were lucky enough to be in that pool, fabulous for you. Obviously, that's fabulous because it's a disease that takes a lot of work. I know that. The good thing about it, and the reason I'm in this field and have been for 30 years, is because I found out when I was kind of a middle-aged nurse that there was a lot that could be done to make diabetes better. When I was a very young nurse, I didn't like diabetes at all because I thought it was a disease that was pretty difficult and pretty ugly for people because I saw the downside, what happened in the hospital. And then I found out midway through my life that there were a lot of things that you could do to make it better. And now I wanted to get into the field so that we didn't have the terrible complications that I'd seen when I was younger. And I'm happy to tell you that the complications I saw in my youth are pretty much gone from the hospital now, and it's fabulous what has happened. So I've been enjoying being on this side of trying to help people with diabetes be healthy. I've got a couple of little red piece of papers throughout the room, and I'd like someone with a red paper to read what it says, and I'd like you guys to tell me if it's a truth or a myth. Anybody with a red paper willing to speak? Would you mind doing it?
I have the thing you just brought up. People with type 1 diabetes no longer have diabetes after bariatric surgery.
Truth or myth?
And that's a truth, false actually, because some people still have it right afterwards.
Yes. Who knows what type 1 is? Can you tell me?
Type 1
is where your pancreas doesn't produce any insulin at all, and you are lifelong dependent on it.
Yes, excellent. So those folks will not have their diabetes disappear because they can't make any insulin, and we can't recreate that process because their pancreas itself is just not working anymore. Okay, so that's one group that aren't going to get better. Now, type 1s are only 5% of our population of diabetics, so they're not very many folks like that, but that is a group that's really important and that they understand they can't ever stop that insulin. And if they do try to stop it right after surgery, they could end up in some big trouble within a couple of weeks. We've had a couple of those patients come our way who've had that experience. Another red paper, I see one over here.
It says people with diabetes who use insulin prior to bariatric surgery have a slightly higher risk of continuation of diabetes after surgery. I think that's false.
Actually, it's true. The more insulin that you needed to take care of your diabetes, the more chance you might not get rid of it totally. Melissa, your dietitian, the dietitian, did I have your name right, Melissa? Yep. Laura, I'm sorry, just met you tonight. She was telling me about a patient of hers that was on 130 units of insulin and now is down to very small. Would you say 60 now? 5. And how far out from surgery is she? 6 months. Okay. So that's a person who at least you'll definitely require less medication, but it may be that she's going to continue, which now that she's down to 5 units, I would say she's probably going to get off of it because it's not very much. But some folks, the more they needed, the more chance they might still use some insulin after surgery. I've actually seen some patients at our hospital who are taking, you're not going to believe this, but 600 or 800 units of insulin a day. And so if they can get down to even 200 or 300 or 100, it would be fabulous. Because one bad thing about insulin is it causes you to gain weight. So the more you can get off of it, the better. So it'll still be a wonderful, wonderful thing. Yes?
Is it possible to be type 2 diabetic and on insulin, but eventually get down to the point where you can just use other medication besides insulin, like metformin? Is that
Absolutely.
too?
Absolutely. Type 2 diabetics taking insulin can back down to pills, and then they can back off of pills if certain things in their life improve, okay? And one of those things is weight, and the other is exercise. And of course, diet has to be a good part of this too. So yes, you can back off of those pills with type 2 diabetes. Yeah. Where's the other red paper we had here? Somebody else have one? We had 3, I thought. No? Okay. You think you have it? No. Okay, that's all right. Okay, I'm going to talk about a few slides I have here, and you guys can feel free to ask questions all along the way because I'd rather meet your needs than what I have prepared here. So if you have some needs, let me know that, and or ask questions anytime you want. And then we're going to ask a few more truths and myths when we get past this here. Okay. What I'm going to talk about is once you do get rid of diabetes, or even when you get down to a small amount of medication, how do you make sure that diabetes doesn't come back? Because here's the bad side of this deal. The studies, which again aren't very many, that are trying to track people long-term after bariatric surgery, are now showing that about half the people who don't have diabetes after surgery will probably have diabetes again at 10 years out. About half. So the goal then is to figure out how not to let that happen. Okay? What do you think is the number one way how not to let that happen? Diet and exercise. I just saw a look on your face that I see on everybody's face that I teach. And it's that word that starts with an E. We do not love that word in America, do we? We do not love that word. You know, I've taught a long time about diabetes and where it came from and why we have it. And I've been asked a lot of questions about why we have more of it than we used to have. And I've come to this conclusion, and I might be it's just Sandie's theory, okay? My grandma and grandpa owned a farm, and they used to separate the cream off the milk from their cows. And I remember seeing this yellow cream, yellow stuff on the top, and they churned some of it into butter, and they whipped some of it into whipped cream. And by golly, we ate the real stuff when I visited my grandma and grandpa. And we had full-fatted milk, and we had gravy, and we had all this stuff that today we think is horror to eat, right? And guess what? They weren't heavy. So you know what I've decided? We don't have a food problem so much here. We have an exercise problem. We have an activity problem. And as our life got easier after World War II and the technological age, industrial age came in, that's when our trouble started. The foods got more exciting and the exercise and activity got less and less. And we started making all kinds of machines to do stuff for us. My favorite machine that I think is so funny is the leaf blower, which you're seeing a lot of this time of year. Instead of raking anymore, which doesn't seem like that much exercise, but it still burns a lot of sugar and calories, people just blow those leaves all on the street. And then they let somebody else pick them up. I guess it's supposed to be the street cleaner, I don't know. But we found all kinds of ways to not move our bodies, including the remote control. I'm old enough to remember when I had to get up and change the station, and it was like a dial tube thing. But now we don't even have to do that. So we can sit there all night from 5 o'clock after supper until we go to bed at 11 o'clock at night, munching out of our favorite potato chip bag. And pretty soon it's gone because we're mindlessly eating instead of mindfully eating. And pretty soon we put on, how many, 2,000 extra calories sitting there, and we haven't even moved to turn the channel. That's what our problem is. So that big bad word exercise, which my grandma and grandpa never probably even heard of before. All they knew is they lived their life the way they were taught to live their life. So our problem is we need to figure out how to live a life that's similar to theirs, but not maybe call exercise, and maybe we'd be happier people. You know, if we just could figure out a way to make our natural life cause us to move a little more. Like maybe if we walked to the store to buy only 3 or 4 things and carried home in one handful in a bag, like folks did years ago, or like they do in Europe when people live in the same street that their grocery store's on. And if we did that every day of the week and walked to market in France, I visited France one time, they walk to the bakery every day. And they're not heavy, but they eat rich, wonderful things. They're like a croissant and cheese that we would think is so bad. They walk to the store and they walk back, and by the time of the night, they've worn off their croissant. But we go and we buy a bag of, a dozen. We come home and sit down on our nice comfy chair in a nice warm house and eat ours. So our problem really is we've got to get active, even though we hate that big bad word. But yes, that's the key. That's the key to prevention of all this stuff, I think. Because none of us want to starve. So if we don't want to starve, we got to move, right? Okay, so how to prevent the return of diabetes is food choices and exercise. So I want to talk a minute about the meal plan to help prevent bariatric surgery. Now, I know some of you in a state where you're not allowed to eat all kinds of food products at this point still. You might still be on liquids, and you might not be able to eat all varieties of food. But I'm not talking about those of you who are only 6 months out of surgery. I'm talking about folks who are a couple years out of surgery, and their diabetes has been going really well, but now we have to start worrying about, can we keep it where it's at? So this is the kind of time when I'm talking about this kind of a diet. There's actually some national guidelines about bariatric surgery written by 2 very large and well-known groups of physicians, and this is coming from their practice guidelines from 2013. And they recommend a low-carb, low-fat, and high-protein diet, which I know you guys are totally into the high protein. You understand where to get that protein and how to drink it or eat it very, very well. They also recommend 3 servings of dairy products daily because this helps make sure that you have enough calcium and phosphorus. And those probably are kind of hard to get in for non-milk drinkers. Most of us probably don't concentrate too hard on eating calcium products or dairy products with calcium. So that takes some concentration. So here's some thoughts for you on some suggested meal patterns that might work, because whenever I go to a talk on food and somebody gives me some generic information like have low carb, high protein, I don't know what that really means for my life. So I'm trying to break this down into something that maybe you could go home and think about. Suggested breakfast, some kind of a protein food. You guys know where to get protein food. This is just one of many ideas, is eggs, plus a fruit, plus a dairy. And that would take care of all the recommended carbs that we would recommend for that meal. And your dairy can be yogurt, it can be milk, it could be cheeses. I just suggested that something that a lot of folks might like to have would be yogurt in the morning. A suggested lunch is some kind of protein, a fruit, and again a dairy, because we've got to get in 3 servings of dairy a day. So this might be a time when, again, you could eat a yogurt or you could have a milk if you like milk. A sandwich is a very typical way to get in a protein. And along with all this, you could have 15 to 30 grams of something starchy, such as 1 to 2 slices of bread or a cup of soup. Those would be 15 to 30 grams of carb right there. A lot of ladies, you might prefer to have a half a sandwich and have a little less bread that way, but you could pile it up with more meat. Because protein is really important for you guys, because you need more than the average person. So, but you might want to try to cut down on the carb by having just the half of a slice of bread with it, or the half a sandwich with it. And then supper, again, protein, you need something lean fish, lean poultry, lean meat, and then you need veggies, and or some kind of a salad. So green veggies are best because they have the lowest amount of carb. Remember, we're looking for a low carb diet. And then again, you could have 15 to 30 grams of something starchy, such as a dinner roll, 1/2 to 1 cup of potatoes. Does anybody know what 1/2 cup of anything looks like on a plate? What could you compare it to? A what? Yeah, that's about right, yeah. A little bit more than that, maybe. It's a tennis ball probably is about 1/2 cup. And a full cup is like your fist size, especially a lady's fist. A man's fist is about a cup and a half, but a lady's fist is about a cup. So you could put that next to your potatoes, your mashed potatoes, and see if it matches, and then be 1 cup. And 1 cup of mashed potatoes is going to be 30 grams of carb. So, do you know most of the baked potatoes that were served in a restaurant are about twice the size we should have? So you should cut it in half and take that other half home. They're giganto for a diabetic. So you want to cut that in half. And 1/4 to 1 baked potato, depending on the size of that baked potato, again, would be 15 to 30 grams. So, not a lot of starchy carbs in this diet, and I know that starchy carbs are not the best thing for people after bariatric surgery, so this is a good recommendation coming out of the clinical guidelines that we have. A suggested evening snack. The meal plan that I just showed you didn't have the full 3 servings of dairy. It only had 2, one for breakfast and one for lunch. And so I think a good evening snack, which most folks do like an evening snack. If you don't force yourself to have it. But if you like one, a good idea for you to make sure you're getting something nutritional would be to include the dairy, some kind of dairy at your bedtime meal, such as a cheese, and white cheese is recommended over cheddar for low-fat eating, and yogurt, recommended to be a low-fat yogurt or non-fat yogurt. And don't forget that yogurts come in a frozen variety also. I have a lot of people tell me, especially guys, they don't like yogurt. It's kind of a lady food, I think, at least from my family's perspective. But don't forget you can get frozen yogurt, and they taste every bit like ice cream to me. I think they're delicious. So there's a lot of them in the market, in the ice cream section. But make sure that you pick one for the best yogurt. I would pick one that says non-fat or low-fat for you when you're trying to prevent weight gain, which is all the problem that we need to worry about for diabetes, the return of diabetes. And then, of course, it's that big word E, that big E word that we decided wasn't our favorite word, is trying to figure out how to get some movement into our life. And, you know, when I started in the field of diabetes, they used to say you had to exercise a certain number of minutes a day, and it had to be in a row all together, or it wasn't going to matter. I remember I had a type 1 diabetic say to me that she had heard at the University of Minnesota about 20 years ago, that if she didn't do it 30 minutes every time, every day, then she might as well not do it at all. And I thought, wow, who can do that? I mean, who would even say that to somebody? Who's perfect? Are you? I'm not. I didn't get my exercise in today. It was a hard day for me, and I used to think that was really bad, but you know, I'm learning not to beat myself up and just get back on the bicycle tomorrow. And when I think better, when I give myself more grace like that, I find that I do better than when I used to try to be perfect. Because sometimes I beat myself up so bad for being imperfect, then I want to eat a whole dozen donuts. Anybody ever done that? When you're imperfect, you're like, okay, well, I was imperfect this morning for breakfast, so what the heck? I'm going to go to the donut store today, right? I used to think like that until I had to learn to forgive myself for not being perfect at breakfast today, but I could still be better at lunch today. Okay, so tomorrow I'm going to be better at my exercising, all right? And so that's how, you know, perfection is just not going to make it. So we can't do that. So I have learned over the years that more and more research is showing us that every little movement matters. It doesn't have to be timed. It doesn't have to be all in a sequence. It doesn't have to be 20 minutes in a row. It doesn't have to be 10 minutes in a row. And I have found that extremely freeing, because sometimes carving out that amount of time in my life is really difficult. So one of the things I was just telling Chris in the back of the room that has helped me is I've gotten one of these little Fitbit things that I can wear on my wrist. And it's kind of like this pedometers we used to wear on our waistline, but these stay in place and don't pop off and I don't lose them in the toilet, which I've done before several times. It's fun digging out one of your pedometers out of a public bathroom, which I actually have done before, because I really wanted it back. But now they don't pop off, which is very nice, so I like it on my wrist. But you can take a look at this thing all day long and it'll tell you how you're doing on your goal. My goal is 10,000 steps a day, and I used to have a job where that was easy to do. Now I have a job where I walk in a smaller little area, and so it's not easy to get that in my work days. So now I have to do more at home. Well, when I get home at night, I'm kind of tired, and sometimes it's dark now, and sometimes it's getting cold. And I like to walk outside, but it's, you know, I can find lots of reasons not to when it's as cold as it is today. And so you know what I'm starting to do? I'm starting to run in place or walk in place and just let these little walking steps accumulate on here. And I've decided it doesn't matter where I do it, the treadmill or outside, or whether I walk big steps or little steps, at least I got a step in. So now I've decided when the cell phone rings, I'm gonna get up off the chair instead of staying in the chair and start pacing while I talk. And when I do that, I start, I forget that I'm exercising, but I just keep walking around the island in my kitchen the whole time, around my dining room table. They've got wood floors. I'm afraid I'm gonna start pacing a little indentation though. Wouldn't that be funny if I sold the house and somebody wanted to know why there was a ring around my dining room floor of indentation? It would be funny. But anyway, that's what I'm trying to do. And I have found that really helpful because sometimes I can put on several hundred more steps. And then this thing communicates with my computer, and both my computer in my basement office as well as my iPad will tell me periodically how I'm doing. And it says throughout the day, congratulations, you did it, or you're an overachiever, or you know, or you've only got 2,000 steps to go. But I love the overachiever message. It makes me feel so good. So it just has really been motivating for me. I got it for Christmas last year. I asked for it for Christmas, and it's been continually motivating me all year long. And now my goal has been to beat my steps each month. So I try. If I didn't walk yesterday, sometimes I'll try to walk more tomorrow, so that I can beat up my monthly accumulation of steps. And it's very fun to see that you walk 250,000 steps a month. It's pretty fun. So that's just what I found that works for me. And I love the idea that I can now get little steps in, and every little bit counts. Like I was telling Chris, sometimes when I'm waiting for my copy machine, I only do this at home because if I do it at work it would look really crazy. But I'm waiting for my copy machine and it's kind of slow, so I'll start running up and down like this, and I get 100 steps in waiting for my copy machine to copy. Or I wait for the microwave, I can get another 30, and I've learned that. My kids think I'm out of my mind, as you can imagine. Some of them say to me, Mom, what's the matter? Are you nervous? Anyway, that's how I've gotten it to work, okay? So any idea that you have, I even read one day that fidgety people are thinner than people who don't fidget. Have you ever heard that? So the day I read that, I decided that we went to the movies that night, my husband and I was thinking about the fidgeting person, and I thought, well, how could I fidget standing in this line so that as I wait for my 2,000 calorie popcorn bucket in this street line, I can burn off a little while I'm waiting. And I thought, well, you know, I could just kind of jiggle around and kind of go like this in a line, and it's a long line, and I'll get something done. And then all of a sudden I realized I probably looked like I had to go potty. So I thought, well, maybe I won't do that anymore. Let's not in public. Anyway, think of whatever you can to get yourself moving. Try to enjoy yourself at it. I know sometimes it's hard, but I will tell you one thing, no matter how hard it is to exercise, I feel great about myself when I run, at least mentally anyway. So to me, it's really worth it. Okay, the big thing I want you to know about is if your diabetes does disappear, of course you're not going to be checking your sugars anymore. You would probably not want to. You probably wouldn't want to spend the money. And that would be a wonderful thing to not have to test your sugar. I realize that. But because you might not be testing, I want you to be very aware of the symptoms of diabetes as it might come creeping back to you, because you don't want to let it go untreated if it does come back. And these are the symptoms: thirst, frequent urination, fatigue, especially after meals when your sugar's higher. When people have diabetes after meals, their sugar is often 250 to 300, and they feel like most of us do after Thanksgiving dinner. You're just like laid out. So if you're starting to notice that in a couple of years, then this is a concern for you. You better get your sugar checked, or check it if you still have the strips at home. Blurred vision that varies throughout the day. The high blood sugar causes blurred vision that might get better when your sugar's lower during the day, but it'll get higher like after meals. So if you're noticing that it seems like sometimes you can't see and the next morning you can, it could be diabetes that's the problem. Slow healing wounds or infections, definitely a sign of high blood sugars, and people that have frequent yeast or bladder infections that you can't seem to get healed with 1 or 2 antibiotics, that's a problem, usually of blood sugar, often is a blood sugar. And then I don't know how many of you are aware, but this is how a doctor actually diagnoses your blood sugar. Actual diabetes is a fasting blood sugar test of 126 or more. And they also can diagnose now by another lab test called a hemoglobin A1C. And those of you who have already had diabetes are well aware and sure what that lab test is about. It's a 3-month average of the blood sugar over the last, it's a 3-month average of your blood sugars. So anything over 6.5% is considered diabetes. So to be considered, if it has disappeared for you, your A1C would have to at least be under 6.5% consistently, for about a straight 6 months before they would call it, remission. Likely most people will not have an A1C that goes down below that pre-diabetes state though. I would be surprised if you would be able to get your A1C down to 5.6 would be completely normal, but that might happen to some.
Ours is 5.6.
Is it? Awesome.
And
Awesome.
3 years.
Wonderful.
And
That's
it
great.
was 7.74.
That's fantastic. So if you've actually gotten it down to 5.6, you're not in that pre-diabetes category anymore, which is fantastic. So that's just wonderful. So that's what you would have to be looking for if you were worried it was coming back. Now, those of you with diabetes, if you do have diabetes and it has continued, I would strongly recommend that you continue to test your sugar. You don't need to test it every morning, every meal, and etc. But if you would do this at least 3 times a week, it would be helpful for you to know what the status is of your disease. You're testing your sugar for you. You're not testing it necessarily for your doctor. Your doctor's going to do the A1C to see how you're doing. You're going to test your sugar to help you know how you're doing so that you can see, do I need to watch my food? What's happening with the medicine? It gives you some information to help you along the way. I recommend that you test before breakfast, about 3 mornings a week, and before and after your largest meal of the day, about 3 times a week. Why would you test after? To see how your body's handling the food, exactly. You know, we can count carbohydrates and we can read how much carbs are in something, but unless you know exactly the portion size that you're eating, and you've measured it in a cup, and you're positive that you've only eaten that much, and you're staring at a label in the box that promises you that's all that's in that food, unless you do that, you're not really sure what carbs you're eating. So especially if you cooked your own food or you went to a restaurant where you have no label, then it's really kind of a guess, isn't it, what else in there. So the way to find out if your favorite restaurant meal is causing you trouble is to test your sugar 2 hours after, okay? And 2 hours after, your goal should be less than it would be, higher than it would be before the meal, but we still like it about under 160. So a lot of folks find, you go to a restaurant, you pick something, and you come home and you find out you're 250 after. The next time you might decide, well, either I'll put half of it in a doggy bag before I eat it another meal, or I'm going to maybe pick another thing to eat. Because there was something in that dinner I didn't realize was going to cause my sugar to go up. And sometimes it's just the marinade they might put on a meat or a fish. It tastes wonderful, doesn't it? Better than at home. So what all's on that lovely food? It could be something sweet that was added that you just didn't know was there. Or perhaps the portion that you decided to eat of the potatoes was a little more than the half-cup portion listed in the book that you have at home to look at. So I do believe testing really helps. So know your numbers and figure out what you can do with your food to get them down. There's a lot you can do to experiment around. Okay, where do you want to be with your health in the future? I think this is an important question because as we deal with day-to-day stuff and life gets in the way and drama gets in the way and all kinds of stuff gets in the way, we can't be perfect. But if we just think about where is it we really do hope we're going to be, how well do we want to feel, what do we really want our weight to be, how do we want our diabetes to be looking in about 5 years, this is how you get there, is to set some goals for yourself and then see if you can how well you can do with these goals. They need to be specific goals, not just I want to lose weight, period. It needs to be, what am I going to do? One specific thing this month. One specific thing. So I will join a gym, I will swim for exercise, I will get one of these things and walk more, I will wear a hole in my dining room floor, something on that order. If you want to lose some weight, then it's really helpful to break that down into something really small. What one change can you make? You know, if you're a big pop drinker, I meet a lot of pop drinkers in my diabetes clinic. If you could get yourself to just cut out, 2 out of your 6 cans a day, that would be enormous, enormous. Or you could eat a vegetable at lunch and dinner that you've never eaten before. You could add that to your lunch or dinner, as we were talking about. Whenever you choose to eat something like a veggie that fills you up more, has more fiber in it, it will help to replace some of the other foods that you're eating that might be a little harder on your weight or on your diabetes. So it fills you up a little bit more. Eat it first so that you do get a little bit more full, and then it will make you less hungry for those starchy carbs that are more of a problem for the diabetes and the weight, okay? So that might be one of your goals. Just see if you could add a lettuce salad or find some kind of veggie you could add to your meals. Okay, questions, thoughts? Yes?
I don't have diabetes yet, and well, we're going, I won't, because I'm gonna have surgery next month. But, you said thirsty, so what do you mean, because I get dry mouth and stuff a lot, is that it, or is it just you really want to drink water?
You really want to drink water,
Okay.
yeah. And one of the ways I tell folks to determine if they're thirsty is, are you going to the bathroom more than people you're around?
Oh,
Do you go more than other people seem to go? Are you getting up at night when people your age aren't getting up at night? Like a lot of gentlemen tell me they get up once or twice, but so does my husband, because he's got a prostate problem at his age. And so if you're finding out people your age never get up to go to the bathroom and you're getting up twice, then I think about, I wonder if something must be wrong. Now, if you're drinking a whole gallon of something before bed, that would be logical. But if, say you live with other folks and you're all drinking the same amount, but you're getting up twice and they're not, I'd be concerned about that. I met a gentleman one time who had diabetes, and he had gotten up in the middle of the night. He was so thirsty. He drank a whole gallon of apple cider. A whole gallon. He said he knew something was probably wrong with himself because he was so thirsty. But his wife was ill with cancer, and he didn't want to tell her, so he was trying to hide his symptoms and take care of her. Well, that morning she got up and she looked in the refrigerator and she said, "Where is the apple cider?" Because, a woman isn't going to miss a gallon of apple cider in the fridge because it takes up the whole shelf. And he said, "Well, kind of like drink it." She said, "You're going to the doctor right now." Some words going out of you. And of course, his sugar was 400 because the drink he chose to drink when he was so thirsty had sugar in it on top of the fact that he had sugar. So, so that's the kind of thirst that's really unusual thirst. Yes?
Isn't it true though, on some low-fat things you have to watch because low-fat means more sugar in it?
Yes, it is true. There are some substituted foods out there that will advertise themselves as low sugar, and you'll think this is the best food to pick, but read the label, because a lot of them, first of all, they have something sweet in them, and the something sweet is going to be some kind of artificial sweetener, or else it wouldn't taste good at all. But they've usually replaced the sugar, some of the sugar anyway, with a starch that's called modified food starch. And it's actually there, if you look at Eskimo sugar-free pies, I probably should have said that if this is taped on the internet, but that happens to be one product that, at least in the past, I haven't looked at it for the last year or so, there actually was more carbs in the lower sugar, the one that said sugar-free or low sugar, than in the regular. So you really just need to read the label, because they can be very misleading.
Yeah.
And when you're reading a label, if you have diabetes, what you want to look for is the total carb. Don't look for sugars, just total carb, because the total carb is all going to turn into sugar in your body. So that's the word you're concerned about.
That's what, when we would go visit his aunt down in Oklahoma, and his dad and his dad's brother both had diabetes, and she would buy sugar-free cookies. And she said, "Well, it says they're sugar-free." I said, "Yeah, but look at the carbs in it. That's what makes the diabetes bad, is the carbs in it."
That's right. That's right, very, very good.
She didn't understand that.
The other thing about the sugar-free foods is a lot of them have this, what's called sugar-free, what's the word I want to have about this sorbitol? What's it called?
Sugar alcohol.
Sugar alcohol, thank you, yeah. And the sugar alcohols cause a lot of gassiness and diarrhea. One time I worked in a nursing unit and some sales rep had brought us a whole kind of a fishbowl looking thing of hard candy. And it was sugar-free because he was selling a diabetes product. And everybody was dipping into that thing all day, and pretty soon, in the middle of the afternoon, there was a line up at the bathroom. And I started to realize what we'd all been eating, and I thought, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, this wasn't good. So the bad thing is when it comes with sugar-free candies, and especially anything sweet that has that sorbitol stuff in it, you can't have more than a couple or you'll be real sorry. So that's one thing most people don't realize. Yes?
Is there any hope for diabetics who've been diabetic like 28 years and it didn't totally go away and it's been 18 months?
Well, I doubt at this point it's going to totally go away, but I hope it's better, and as long
Well,
as
it's a lot better,
good.
a lot less insulin.
Yes, and but the more, if you continue to lose weight, you know, it's possible, but after that many years, your pancreas probably isn't making much insulin. So I would guess you're still going to need a little bit of insulin. So, yeah, it's not a perfect science, unfortunately. But I'm glad you're needing a lot less insulin. And you look great.
About 1/8 of what I was taking.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah.
It's a lot less expensive, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh.
A lot less expensive. Any other questions? Yes.
So, I'm kind of confused with it. Is sugar, if you have something like a piece of cake is sugar, or a piece of bread, you're talking the same thing as sugar. Is it the same thing?
Yes, both the sugar in the bread, in the cake, and the starchy content of the bread and the flour will all turn into blood sugar in your body. Okay, all of it does. It'll take a little longer for the bread to dissolve into blood sugar than it will the cake, but it'll all turn into sugar in your body. The better carbs to eat are the foods or the fruits, and some vegetables have carbs in them. They're a lot better for you, and anything whole wheat is better for you than anything white, like white flour, white cake, white cookie, white flours and cookies. Any of those things are going to turn into blood sugar much faster. So it's better to eat the complex carbs like the fruits, the dairy products, and things with a lot of fiber in them. That's why I mentioned up here, if you're going to eat a roll, eat a whole wheat one. The more whole wheat you can find, the better.
Why does insulin cause you to gain weight?
Insulin helps your metabolism. Actually, metabolism means it helps get the food you eat into the cells where you need it for energy. So like every cell has to have some sugar in it. And that's the whole purpose of insulin, is to move it in. And for some reason with type 2s, their cells don't allow the insulin to work the way it's supposed to, so the sugar stays outside the cell in our blood, and then we can measure it in our finger. But it's supposed to be in the muscle cell. And so when it makes you gain weight, it's doing what it's supposed to do. It's helping you use your calories and your food like you're supposed to, okay? People who have a high blood sugar untreated actually lose weight because their body can't use the sugar that they're eating, so it actually gets urinated out. And so when they're first diagnosed, a lot of people have lost a lot of weight. And then that weight starts to pile on as soon as they get the insulin going, because the insulin now causes them to use their calories. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I have a question.